Agriculture has a profound impact on climate change through its influence on the atmosphere, pedosphere, which is soil, and the biosphere. Activities such as methane emissions from livestock, land use changes, overgrazing and overcultivation contribute significantly to greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity loss and environmental degradation. At the end of this presentation, there are 3 slides with the main points and statistics for you to apply in your 20-mark question. So please do not panic about rushing your notes. I have summarised the main things for you. First, let's look at methane emissions and the atmosphere. Agriculture is a major source of methane, a greenhouse gas that traps heat in the atmosphere with warming potential 25 times greater or more than carbon dioxide over a century. Livestock, particularly cattle, release methane through enteric fermentation during digestion. Additionally, rice paddies contribute to atmospheric methane because their waterlogged conditions create an anaerobic environment where methane-producing bacteria can thrive. Globally, methane emissions from agriculture account for approximately 40% of human-caused methane emissions, with livestock alone accounting for 14.5% of total greenhouse gas emissions. These emissions disrupt the natural balance of the atmosphere, intensifying the greenhouse effect and driving climate change. Next, let's look at land use change and the biosphere. The conversion of forest into agricultural land is one of the most significant ways agriculture impacts the biosphere. Forests, which are integral to the biosphere as carbon sinks, are cleared for activities like cattle grazing and soybean farming, reducing the ability of ecosystems to absorb atmospheric CO2. Soybean, as shown in the image, are the common food source for areas that cannot produce enough biomass for livestock. The Amazon rainforest is particularly affected. Around 80% of deforestation in the Amazon is driven by agriculture, with cattle ranching or soybean production being the leading causes. This deforestation not only reduces the biosphere's capacity to store carbon, but also releases substantial amounts of stored carbon from the vegetation and soil into the atmosphere, approximately 1.1 billion tonnes of CO2 annually. What about overgrazing and the pedosphere? Overgrazing is where livestock feed excessively on vegetation, depleting plant cover and damaging the pedosphere due to root damage. This in turn significantly depletes plant growth in the future, increasing the risk of land degradation. This can lead to soil compaction, erosion and loss of organic matter, weakening the soil's capacity to store carbon in the future. In turn, this degradation diminishes the pedosphere's role as a carbon sink and accelerates carbon release into the atmosphere. In the Amazon rainforest, deforested areas often transition into overgrazed pastures. This means that typically every 7 years the cycle has to begin again, with removal of virgin forest and replacement for cattle ranching. Studies indicate that 40% of deforested Amazon land becomes degraded pastureland, again further unable to support healthy vegetation or contribute meaningfully to the biosphere. Globally, degraded grasslands exacerbate climate change by emitting 2.4 billion tonnes of CO2 annually. This is typically from the loss in carbon sequestration, but also the release of carbon stored inside the soils. Overcultivation, soil erosion, and desertification. Overcultivation involves intense cropping without allowing the pedosphere to recover, depleting nutrients and leading to soil erosion. When the soil is exposed, organic carbon stored in the pedosphere oxidizes, which releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Some of this may also be washed away by soil erosion, as there are no roots to hold the soil together. Over time, these practices can cause desertification, reducing the biosphere's productivity and biodiversity. In agricultural zones near the Amazon, overcultivation has led to significant soil degradation. This term has been phrased savannization, due to the significant decrease in biomass net productivity and soil carbon storage. Globally, an estimated 24 billion tonnes of fertile soil are lost annually due to erosion, undermining the pedosphere's ability to support crops, sequester carbon and sustain the biosphere. What about impacts of land use change on the water balance and carbon sequestration? This is a perfect example for you to use within your water and carbon cycles work. Land use change significantly disrupts the water balance within a region, affecting the rate at which carbon is stored into the biosphere. Trees act as vital reservoirs for water and play a critical role in maintaining the hydrological cycle. In rainforests, they enable rapid rates of evapotranspiration, contributing to consistently high levels of humidity and rainfall. These conditions are essential for efficient nutrient cycling and the lush growth of vegetation, which collectively sequester billions of tons of carbon annually. Typically, when these trees are removed, the rate of evapotranspiration drops dramatically. Rainforest regions, which typically experience 2,000 to 3,000 millimeters of rainfall annually, can see this figure plummet to less than 1,000 millimeters, with increasingly unpredictable rainfall patterns. For those of us paying attention, 1,000 millimeters is typically less than the north of the UK receiving, despite being at a significantly higher latitude. A stark example of this can be observed at Tangura Ranch, a deforested area about 50 miles from the Amazon rainforest border. Some years, this region receives as little as 800 millimeters of rainfall, demonstrating how land use change disrupts local climate stability. It can be argued this is a perfect example of savannisation taking place. This decline in rainfall is not solely due to the loss of water storage in trees, but also relates to the decrease in condensation nuclei present in the atmosphere. Condensation nuclei, including plant fibres released by vegetation, provide surfaces around which water vapour condenses into droplets, forming clouds and precipitation. While arable crop fields can contribute to the release of some condensation nuclei, they do so at a much lower rate compared to virgin rainforest areas, further exacerbating the reduction in rainfall and carbon storage capacity. The combination of reduced water cycling and diminished carbon sequestration creates a feedback loop, intensifying regional climate change challenges and threatening the overall stability of the biosphere. Our last area looks at fertilisers and their contribution to climate change. The role of synthetic fertilisers in agriculture plays a significant role in climate change, primarily through the release of nitrous oxide, a potent greenhouse gas. Nitrous oxide has a global warming potential approximately 288 times greater than carbon dioxide over a 100-year period, making it a critical driver of atmospheric warming. These fertilisers are rich in nitrogen, which boosts the crop yields for many farmers, particularly in land that's already degraded, but it can lead to unintended consequences inside the pedosphere and areas within the biosphere. When applied to the field, the nitrogen is only partially absorbed by plants. The excess nitrogen is often transformed into nitrous oxide through microbial processes such as nitrification and denitrification. As a result, globally, agricultural soils are responsible for approximately 60% of anthropogenic nitrous oxide emissions. As a result, globally, fertiliser production contributes an estimated 1.4% of total greenhouse gas emissions, highlighting its substantial carbon footprint. In addition to this, the runoff and indirect emissions. Excess fertiliser is not absorbed by crops, and it often leaches into water bodies, leading to eutrophication and the formation of hypoxic or oxygen-depleted zones. This eutrophication essentially leads to a decrease in the amount of oxygen that is present. As a result, we can see decreasing aquatic life. These zones reduce aquatic biodiversity and result in the release of methane and carbon dioxide from decaying organic matter in affected water systems, as a result increasing the rate of climate change. The next 3 slides show a summary of the main statistics and takeaways from this video. However, it wouldn't be Bond Hill geography without a little bit of bright news. It's not all doom and gloom. Check out my video on how agriculture could be modified to reduce carbon emissions.